Welcome to the Virtual Memories Show. I'm your host, Gil Roth, and you're listening to a weekly podcast about books and life. Not necessarily in that order. You can subscribe to the Virtual Memories Show through iTunes or by plugging our RSS feed into your favorite podcatcher. You can find the RSS feed on our websites, vmspod.com or chimeraobscura.com/vm. We're also on Twitter and Instagram at vmspod, at facebook.com/virtual memories show, at virtualmemoriespodcast.tumblr.com, and on YouTube and TuneIn by searching for Virtual Memories Show. And if you like this podcast, please go to the iTunes store, look up the Virtual Memories Show, and leave a rating or review for us. Maybe that'll inspire Apple to promote us a little bit. Of course, you could also promote us by telling people about the podcast on social media or however else you publicize things you like. You can support the Virtual Memories Show and get access to exclusive content with a recurring monthly donation via Patreon. Just visit patreon.com/vmspod and set up your level of support. You'll get new material from our patron-only blog, and you'll also get to listen to my quarterly bonus podcast, Fear of a Square Planet, which features extra material from our guests and is only available to supporters of the show. So visit patreon.com/vmspod or paypal.me/vmspod and help me continue to produce smart conversation about books, art, comics, and culture every week at the Virtual Memories Show. All right, that's another crazy week behind me. There was an eventful Washington, D.C. visit where I discovered that I nearly wound up as a witness in a 6-hour congressional hearing on the opioid epidemic. Turned out that the only thing that saved me was that a congressional staffer forgot that my trade association would be a really good resource to consult about a proposed bill in this area. So in this case, being the invisible man worked out to my benefit. It's for the best because while I'm sure I wouldn't have said anything inopportune, chances are over 5 or 6 hours of that hearing, I would have ended up on C-SPAN's blooper reels at some point. But anyway, just as I got back from that trip, my old man ran into some health problems. So we've been dealing with that, and things look pretty good now. So I'm not going to go into that any further. But all of this is a sort of roundabout excuse for telling you that I have no idea whether there will be an episode next week. I do not have any backlog episodes, and I have no one lined up for this weekend. I will be in New York City for the Antiquarian Book Fair on Saturday. Nerd alert. So maybe that'll turn into an impromptu show. And tonight, which is Tuesday, March 6th, I'll be in New York for a panel at the Grolier Club. I'm just in the audience, but 4 of my past pod guests will be on the panel along with some other science fiction authors. The 4 guests are Henry Wessels, John Crowley, Ellen Datlow, and Samuel Delaney. So anyway, maybe out of that, some sort of pod conversation will ensue. We'll see. Otherwise, could be a yawning silence ahead, which brings us to this week's show. Our guest this time around is science fiction writer Lavie Tidhar. Now, Lavie and I recorded last October when I was in London, and I've sort of been saving this episode, partly because there were time-sensitive ones to run ahead of it, like other people had brand new books out, and then partly because the longer I waited, it sort of turned into a joke that I was never airing this one. Plus, I sort of forgot how entertaining this conversation was, which I finally realized when I sat down to edit it this weekend. You'll see. Now, John Clute, who's been on the show a few times, introduced me to Lavie, and he suggested a few of his books for a crash course before recording. A Man Lies Dreaming and Central Station were the 2 that I read, and I enjoyed the hell out of both of them. They're quite different from each other. Central Station is a mosaic science fiction novel that is a sort of collection of interlinked short stories. And A Man Lies Dreaming is something very, very different. We talk about them pretty extensively during the episode, so I won't go into them here too much, except to say that A Man Lies Dreaming is an alternate reality where the Nazis got overthrown by a communist uprising, and Hitler is hiding out in London as a hard-boiled private investigator named Wolf. It is awfully, awfully entertaining. Hitler goes through some horrible degradations, which Lavie and I talk about. Anyway, A Man Lies Dreaming. I enjoyed it, but again, very different than Lavie's other book. And as I look at some of his other ones, while there are common threads, he seems to jump from form to form to form with each book. So I take that as a positive. Anyway, the episode sort of speaks for itself, so let's get it rolling. And here's Lavie's bio. Lavie Tidhar is the World Fantasy Award-winning author of Osama, 2011, of The Violent Century, 2013, and of the Jerwood Fiction Uncovered Prize-winning A Man Lies Dreaming, 2014, in addition to many other works and several awards. His latest novel is the Campbell Award-winning and Clark Award-nominated Central Station, 2016. He works across genres, combining detective and thriller modes with poetry, science fiction, and historical and autobiographical material. His work has been compared to that of Philip K. Dick by The Guardian and the Financial Times, and to Kurt Vonnegut's by Locus. Oh, he's also co-editor and co-founder of the Jewish Mexican Literary Review, but we don't get into that during the podcast. And now, the Virtual Memories conversation with Lavie Tidhar. So you did an interview in 2010. I only know this because I was, trying to do some research. You mentioned you have a book that can only be done in Hebrew.
Did I?
Yeah. And I was assuming you were going to have that reaction of complete befuddledness. It leads to my question, though. Do you consider yourself an Israeli writer or a British writer?
Well, yeah, that's a tricky question. I mean, I never considered myself a British writer. Only now, technically, I am British. And also, China Miéville started referring to me as a British writer, which I was a bit offended by. What do you mean? But then the Israelis don't really consider me an Israeli writer. So, I mean, that's sort of weird situation. So I've kind of come to accept this sort of British Israeli label, which doesn't mean anything. But I think in many ways I am very Israeli, because Israelis are only allowed to write 5 books in their career, and they have 5 topics. You can do the Holocaust, you can do terrorism, you can do the kibbutz, you can do, I can't remember what the other ones are, something to do with Arabs, I think is 4, and then 5 is probably like a middle-aged, thing. But the funny thing is everything I've done is very much in that pattern. So I've done my terrorism book, which is Osama. I've done my Holocaust book, which is A Man Lies Dreaming. The book I think the Hebrew one that you mentioned, I think I would like to do the kibbutz novel. Yeah. But at some point, and it would probably involve aliens.
Oh, you'd have to, But what's the, what was your sort of pulp background that informs? And I only had time to read 2 of your books before this, which I'm now disappointed by, because the more of your work I look at, it's like, wow, I should have been reading this guy for a couple of years before John connected us. Just because every theme you have is sort of, up my alley, as it were. But that idea of filtering things through a pulp sensibility, where did that really start for you?
I have absolutely no idea. I mean, I don't even read pulp. Really, proper pulp. I think what I'm attracted to is the cover art. I've always been attracted to. And as a kid, I used to go up to Haifa, which was the nearest town, and go to these wonderful second-hand bookshops and had all these wonderful pulps. I never read them. I only went for the science fiction, which you could argue is pulp fiction, but I'm talking serious pulp, like proper pulp. Trash.
Yeah, exploitation novels.
All that sort of stuff. The romance and the weird horror. They had the weird little horror series back in the 80s, which would set you a lot of money now if you could get copies of those. So I was always attracted to the art. And actually one of the things I really enjoy now is working with artists, especially if they share that sort of aesthetic and I get to design this sort of stuff, retro pulp art. But I've no real idea. I mean, obviously, I use a lot of kind of Chandler and that sort of thing, but you would hardly describe Chandler as a pulp novelist. He's sort of someone who came from the pulp tradition, or Zelazny or Delaney in science fiction who came from the pulp tradition, but you wouldn't really describe them as pulp writers. So I don't know. I think I'm more attracted to the idea of pulp than actually being directly influenced by it. If that makes sense, I don't know if it does.
Talk about the kibbutznik thing, because you talk about your history growing up on a kibbutz and the idea of someday doing a kibbutz novel. My mom was Shara McKeem.
Right.
You know,
No, not too far then,
yeah. Do you see aspects of that upbringing that seem incredibly weird to quote unquote normal people who weren't raised
Absolutely
communally?
weird, yeah, absolutely. No, I was, as a kid, obviously you're growing up on a kibbutz, you don't see yourself represented in the books you're reading. You know, I was reading mostly translated American science fiction. And American science fiction is not famous for featuring, you know, Israeli characters.
Yeah. Or if they are, they're the badass guy with the commando skills.
Not even, other than this one guy who wrote those weird Israeli mercenaries in space book, and I think he was a big Second Amendment gun nut or something, and he ended up shooting himself in protest at the government. You know, so that's kind of the level we're engaging with. But Philip K. Dick always, you know, he was obsessed with the idea of the kibbutz, and he always had. You know, he was the only writer I would pick up his book and there would be a kibbutz on Mars, you know, and that was amazing. That was mind-blowing stuff because I was the only writer that I could actually see myself in that future, this otherwise very American future that everyone else was writing. So Philip K. Dick has always been a huge influence on me.
Except in terms of schizophrenia, drug use, and all that stuff.
Well, I mean, no, he was never really a big drug user, though. He was mostly on speed, wasn't he? Didn't really like LSD or...
Well, I do consider speed to be a drug. Not that I'm knocking it by any means. But...
and weed, I mean, they were all smoking. I mean, yeah. We're getting off track anyway. No comment on that.
Yeah.
But no, mostly...
But your Philip Dick interest was, you know, he was at least reflecting some aspect of your reality. Or did you pick up on that when you were reading his stuff when you were young?
No, I think what I was attracted to... I mean, the one Philip K. Dick book that I keep going back to is the Simulacra, which is a book it's not one of those Philip K. Dick books people read, but it has this whole subplot about the Israeli government having time travel technology and going back in time to negotiate with the Nazis, you know. I got kind of obsessed with it. Actually, a lot of my books kind of reference Philip K. Dick books, so, you know... Osama would be sort of the man in the high castle and so on. And I actually wrote a book called Martian Suns, which is very much kind of the Philip K. Dick book with Mars and the whole time travel Holocaust thing. So probably not as successful. I think, you know, I was kind of trying for more than I could chew at the time, but occasionally I still see people who seem to have liked that book for some reason.
Yeah, what do you find yourself better at as a writer?
Mm-hmm.
When you mentioned like not being good enough once upon a time to try to tackle a certain thing, have you seen? And I hate to bring this up. Do you see progress in your work? Not that I want to sound like a school administrator or something.
Not really.
I just wonder, do you see things that like, wow, I couldn't have written this, 5 years ago?
I do occasionally look at stuff. I mean, yesterday I had to go and give a talk at a university in town about a short story I wrote about 15 years ago.
Jeez.
And firstly, when I wrote it, I never expected to be asked to come and talk about it one day to a bunch of students who are having to study it. But I also haven't read the story in forever, so I actually went back and read it. And it was interesting because I kind of go, oh, that wasn't bad. I mean, I can see what he's doing here, but that's actually really... I thought, huh... And I thought, I don't think I'm getting any better at this. I think that's really good. Like, I can see a few things where maybe I would have done it differently, but I thought, how did he do that? How did that guy who was me 15 years ago, how did he know to write that? And I actually find, because I'm not comfortable writing the same thing over and over, so I'm always trying to, that's why I keep talking about, we were talking earlier about ambitious failure. I think a lot of what I do is ambitious failure because I'm overreaching. I'm trying to go beyond my comfort zone. I'm trying to do something new. And I know that if I stuck to a very specific set of very bad, very ridiculous skills I have, if I stuck to, say, a sort of hard-boiled pastiche, whatever, I would have an easier time of it. But that's not really interesting to do.
Yeah, there's the... did you have a sense of absolute terror when you were first looking back at that short story? Did you have trepidation that, oh my God, I'm afraid of what I'm going to see here? And then that sense of relief that, holy crap, that guy was actually a good writer?
No.
Or is it just I knew that story was pretty good.
No, because I think everything I do is brilliant.
Of course, yeah. Except your current book, which you were telling before we started.
It's terrible. Don't buy it when it comes out. Well, you get to the point as well when you've been editing so much that even something that looked brilliant when you started looks absolutely terrible. And yeah, I mean,
how do you overcome that sense of? And I know every writer has to deal with this. They're going back to revision after revision and still feeling like you actually have something good there.
Well, I mean, you tend to basically just swear at your editor, but what I discovered is the best way to do that is to lock yourself in the bathroom and then swear at your editor when they can't hear you, because otherwise it doesn't really contribute to a good working relationship. No, it's difficult. And, there's I have been accused of basically disowning my books as soon as they're published. But I think a lot of people do that.
Yeah.
But it's nice when you come back and you kind of pick up a book at random and pick a page at random and you think, that's not bad.
Yeah.
But I also, because I'm not, the person I am now isn't the person who wrote those things. So a lot of the time I kind of wonder, how did that guy do it? Like, I have no idea what he was thinking about.
Could you talk about the editing side of what you do? And it's mainly anthology editing, which sounds more like selecting as opposed to the process of editing other people's stories.
Right.
And how that feeds into your own writing.
Well, I mean, I can edit other people's work. I don't particularly like it, but it's not to say I'm bad at it if I did it. And I do have to do it occasionally. I mean, you do occasionally have to really sit down and pull a story apart to try and make it better. So it's a different process sometimes, because the anthologies I edit, I mean, it's a hobby, essentially. Everyone needs a hobby, and doing unpaying anthologies for me is kind of a hobby.
You're talking to a guy who showed up in London with a bunch of microphones and recorders. Yeah, I have no idea what you mean. Yeah, I
know. I do kind of think, why do I do them? There's no sense in doing them. But I just enjoy it. So some stories you literally just, because mostly it's reprints as well, you do sometimes just pick up the story, you just like this. But sometimes you get very involved, and because I've been doing the World SF anthologies, it's a very active form of editing. It's really reaching out, it's searching, it's very active reading. It's not sitting there and waiting that someone might send you a story. I always I work quite a lot at trying to identify writers, trying to get in touch with them, trying to find out stuff. And then with, say, the first World SF anthology, because I had these contacts in China, and this is back before anyone was publishing Chinese science fiction, I managed to get these stories from China. And I was the first person to publish Chinese science fiction in translation in this century, essentially. But what I got were very rough translations that were kind of done by the author. And I actually had to spend, I think, the largest chunk of my time on the Apex book of World SF was doing the translation editing, which is almost like rewriting it blind, but trying to kind of imagine what the authors intended, Mm-hmm. I mean, it's almost like, I don't think you could do it unless you're a writer yourself and you kind of have a sense of it. And one of the most satisfying things was that both writers kind of came back to me and they said, you did, this is absolutely what I wanted the story to look like. Because it's very hard. It's like doing it with a blindfold, because you can't refer to the original. I've also translated stories from Hebrew, but in that case, I have the advantage of actually being able to read the original. I also have the authors kind of chiming in occasionally.
An Israeli who's willing to give an opinion? I find that very difficult to... I'm just kidding.
Very difficult to imagine. I mean, very, well known for being the quietest people.
Yeah, the go along, get along sort of ethnicity.
Anything goes.
Yeah. Is there a certain Israeli sensibility to your work? And is there something you would characterize as, Israeli, given the cosmopolitanism of where you are now?
Well, I think they are all sort of Israeli, but I mean, they're always filtered through this weird prism of where I've been and who I am. But I mean, I think Central Station is a very Israeli novel. And it's me trying to do an Israeli science fiction novel. But at the same time, I don't think any other Israeli would have written that novel, because I also have that distance of being outside, and kind of observing without actually being necessarily, it's a weird sort of situation to be. But also what I've come to realize with Israel, because I was living there back in 2010, 2011. That's when I started Central Station. And it was very easy to come back, I just came back and everyone assumes that I've been there all along. And also what I discovered was my accent is actually quite posh in Hebrew, which I never realized. I kind of speak received pronunciation, essentially, in Hebrew. So everyone kind of goes, who's this posh kid?
I fooled them all,
walking around. But what I realized it is that there's such a mix of cultures and people that you can't, we like to say there's an American identity or there's an Israeli identity, but there's actually so many sub identities. And one of the big Israeli project was to try and, the melting pot, which is very much like America. It was that idea of bringing all these cultures together and producing the sabra out of it. But I don't know if that's really true in 2017 Israel, so we have all these different cultures and all these different languages and all these different people. I think it's an absolutely fascinating setting for writing a lot of stuff. But I'm not your typical Israeli writer. But then,
Yeah, from my family's perspective, it was really post-Soviet Union and the Somali or Ethiopian exodus or return, I guess, that I don't mean it in a disparaging way, but just changed the cultural mix or sort of accelerated the cultural mix in the country beyond what they had experienced from my relatives who were, shooting at British soldiers back in the 40s. So I'm sure you also. We share a lot of that stuff.
British. But, my granddad fought the British.
But they seem to indicate that as sort of a accelerating change of the culture period. But
I think the Russian immigration, and when we say Russian in Israel, it doesn't really mean Russian. It's mostly Ukrainian, and it's most Jews were living in Ukraine or they were living in the kind of satellite states. But we just go Russians. It's a bit like in London actually when you say Russian, it's like people from Estonia and Latvia, but they're Russians. But I think that had a major change. And I could see it when I came back. You can go through streets that are entirely in Cyrillic lettering. All the shops are in Cyrillic. And funnily enough, all the great Russian science fiction writers pretty much live in Israel, which is bizarre. And they have this whole entirely different science fiction scene in Israel that centers around the Russian writers. And they publish in Russia, in Russian. And no one in Israel knows anything about them. They don't consider them anything to do with Israeli literature. But it's still, it's kind of.
Yeah, did you discover that during the building those World SF anthologies, or is that just something you kind of picked up on through the SF community in general?
I don't know. I kind of pick up things like a magpie, and I've always been interested in, international science fiction. So it just kind of popped up. I never really. The other thing is you don't really meet them. Very much. I've never really had that much contact with them. I've always been quite interested.
Yeah. In the U.S., we've got the whole, SF convention and festival scene. Is there something similar as far as Israel when you're growing up?
Israel has some really good science fiction conventions. But again, the Russian writers, I think they try to involve them at some point. Or I don't know, it's a weird sort of situation. But they have science fiction conventions. The way they differ from America is they're very young conventions, generally. They're more like what you would think of as a media convention with the cosplay and and they're nice, they're fun. I haven't been back in a long time, but they're kind of fun to do.
Yeah. For me, it's a difference between going to there's a small press comics expo that I go to in Maryland versus going to the San Diego Comic-Con where it's 100,000 people and stormtroopers everywhere and.
Yeah, we don't have stormtroopers so much.
Which I mean the Star Wars stormtroopers as opposed to the SS types. But
kind of like Peppa Pig. Apparently you don't get Peppa Pig in Israel.
Oh, yeah, that would be an issue.
That would be awkward. So, no Peppa Pig.
So as long as we're making jokes about Hitler. A Man Lies Dreaming, one of the two novels of yours that I read, enjoyed the living hell out of. For somewhat of the same reason that I went to the opening matinee of Inglourious Bastards, just because I wanted to get an extra 6 hours ahead of watching Nazis get killed. The book has some very, I don't want to say absurd, some wonderful moments of Hitler's torments in this alternate reality your alternate history that you compose for the book. It's one thing when a Jew makes jokes about Hitler, and another when a Gentile does. I've sort of discovered. Did you feel trepidation or weirdness about approaching Hitler, approaching Nazism from this sort of pulp and ultimately, savagely humorous light?
Well, I tried to avoid writing the book because it would have been incredibly stupid to write it, you know. So when I thought of it, and I think the origin of the book is from a line in a Philip Kerr novel. Have you ever read his
I read
stuff?
the first three Berlin Noirs,
So he's got a line in one of his books about Hitler as a private detective, and I think I was reading at the time, and I thought,
ding, ding, ding.
I thought, that's a terrible idea. I thought, no one should do that. I thought, maybe I could get away with doing that, you know. But it would be career suicide, so I really shouldn't, so I should work on some other stuff. And I was working on another novel at the time, The Violent Century, which was a nightmare to write. So once I finished that novel, I really did my best to try and write another book. You know, I tried anything and nothing worked. And then I kind of sat up late at night, it was about midnight. I read the whole book between midnight and 3 o'clock in the morning, essentially.
Were you a dad at that point?
No.
Okay, you didn't have kids?
I was just kind of sitting up in the dark, writing about Hitler. But, as you do. But what I did was I just thought, because I had the first line stuck in my head. It's from Raymond Chandler. It's from The Big Sleep. You know, she had the face of an intelligent Jewess, which is one of those incredibly racist, horrible sentences that he has. And I thought, I'll just write that, and no one has to know about it. You know, and I just need to get out of my system, and I wrote that, and then I wrote the rest of it. And I was like, I had so much fun doing it. It's a terrible thing to say, but I loved writing that particular version of Hitler. You know, it's a lot of fun. But you're absolutely right that the humor is very... I had to look this up. I had to do proper research on this. The humor is what they call... it's kind of like closed humor. So, like, if you're not Jewish, you may not find it funny. And I actually had that problem. I had this editorial meeting with my editor. It was brilliant. But I said, the book is funny. And she said, no. You know, it's not, your book is not funny. There's nothing funny about your book. I was like, no, it's funny. She said, no, you made my assistant cry. I was like, yeah, that's great, but the book is funny. And we sat there for about 2.5 hours, kind of going around in circles over this one pint that was slowly emptying for 2.5 hours. And I'm like, no, but it is funny. And it was really difficult. And I was really relieved when the book came out, when people started reviewing and they go, yeah, it's kind of funny.
I busted a gut. I was laughing, but again, I've got that particular sensibility.
Well, it was a relief, and actually, they were teaching this at university recently. I think in Manchester, it was required reading for literature students, which I was not expecting. Yeah. And the guy who was teaching all the classes kind of told me about it. So I said, "But did they think it was funny? I mean, forget everything else. But did they think it was funny?" And he said, yeah, in a guilty sort of way. Like, they recognized, which I was really pleased about. I mean, my goal with the book was I want to make you laugh, and then if I could make you cry at the end, like, I've achieved what I wanted.
Yeah.
But I just really enjoyed that sort of,
Yeah, see, I had an earlier podcast I did. It was a live episode with a panel. The main writer who was there, Timur Vermes, he did a book called Guess Who's Back? I think it was that or Guess Who or something like that in English, I mean, with Hitler just waking up in modern day Berlin and not knowing what happened and going through this whole thing. And I went through most of the panel thinking Timur was a Jewish writer. And when he mentioned he wasn't, I had
I'm shaking my head here.
Yeah, I was like, that makes this book a little weirder than I thought at the time. Because you're sort of laughing with Hitler and at Hitler and with and at, and it's
I don't know. And it's sold a huge amount. I mean,
that's because we know that Germans.
My book's not sold a huge amount. But also, I have these lovely, lovely German agents, and a lot of my books are published in Germany. And last time I saw them, they were like,
we can't move that.
Like,
here.
we can't. This is not going to get published in Germany. Which I knew from the start. But I'm still bemused as to why a German can write a comedy about Hitler and that becomes a bestseller. And
Well, I think you and I have our suspicions as to why that is. But anyway.
I think my version is a little bit more hard hitting.
Oh, yours is savage, hysterical, and savage, and also more, metaphysical, or at least more multi-layered.
But funny.
Oh yeah, no, I enjoyed that.
I'm glad you thought that.
Yeah, I'm glad that was the first book of yours that I read.
It wasn't a pleasant book to write, for sure. Yeah. I mean, and like I said, I wrote between midnight and 3 a.m. and I wrote the first draft in about 3 months. Because you want to do it really quickly because it's not particularly enjoyable spending all that time out of Hitler's head, as it were.
And did you find that difficult? I mean, I know it's not the Hitler, but, getting into that mindset for having him as a partial narrator for the book.
I wasn't the best person to be around, probably.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a dark time, not as dark as the Holocaust, maybe.
Yeah. It was my personal.
It was my Holocaust. No, but weirdly, I really enjoyed it. I just absolutely had a blast kind of writing it. When you're writing these ridiculous lines and you're kind of laughing to yourself. And I love parodying. I mean, a part of the book is also corresponding with Chandler and how racist and sexist Chandler was, and having Hitler kind of come up with his own versions of these Raymond Chandler speeches. If anyone asks me what I think about detection, I would tell you. But unfortunately, they're not returning my letters.
Well, no, that's what I wondered. Did you get a lot of pushback or blowback from the book at all? Or was there, because we know that there are Jews who can't take a joke either. So I didn't know.
No one was offended. I'm
disappointed.
I was so disappointed. I mean, I had people who went, first no one was offended. I did get these reviews that said many people would be offended. Yes. But it was kind of like I, as a reviewer, was not offended.
Could be in poor taste.
Many people, yeah. And I had one review in the New York Times. I got a full-page New York Times review, basically just to say how much she hated the book. Which was great, and saying it's juvenile and unsubtle. I'm like, no kidding.
Perfect, you got me.
That's kind of the point.
Yeah.
And there's an Israeli critic, not Israeli, a Jewish American critic, who kind of did this whole really long article, not about Man Like Dream specifically, but about, I think it was supposed to be a review of Central Station, but he basically read everything I've written and then wrote this very long article to say how much he hated everything I do. And I mean, I think that's an enormous compliment, because, and to be honest, people don't usually get that sort of thing. And there's certainly science fiction and fantasy writers don't necessarily get that sort of attention. And, I think you must be doing something right if you're pissing people off. I just wish it was easier to piss people off, but it's very, very hard. It's very hard. Keep trying.
Two of your lead characters have been Osama bin Laden and Hitler. So, I mean, you could try and raise the stakes somewhat, but, I'm not sure if there's
Well, I mean, the Osama book, is not in the book. No. That's kind of the
idea
part of
he's
the play. He's kind of always in the shadows, in the background. And but the funny thing was no one wanted to publish that book. And actually people kind of said, we like the book, but we don't want to have like bomb threats into the publisher. So I really got all that. And then it got to the point, it was only coming out from a small press in the UK, Pierce Publishing. And even they kind of went, can we change the title? Like, no. It got to the point where you're kind of thinking they haven't caught Osama bin Laden at that point. And you're thinking, is it going to be good if they catch him? Or is it going to be bad? Like, maybe you could leave it a few more months before you catch him. So the book kind of changes before and after bin Laden is caught, I think. And the same is actually with A Man Likes Dreaming. It's completely changed. If you read it now, after Brexit and after Trump.
Yeah, certainly.
People aren't going to, people are going to accuse me of, kind of cribbing from the news instead of making stuff up.
Exaggerating the potential for fascism in a democratic society.
I had no idea. When the Trump dossier came out with the kind of golden showers thing, which, spoiler alert, some of that in the book. I was like, seriously, you couldn't make this up, and people are going to read that and they go, Lavie kind of, he couldn't.
Yeah.
So it was very.
They're going to go back and look at the copyright, make sure it was. Wait, this is 2016.
And again, with Brexit, if you look at the speech that, the speech that gets delivered at the end of A Man Likes Dreaming, it's almost word for word the speech that Nigel Farage gives after Brexit comes in. Yeah. Which is literally, I just kind of cribbed. The key to it was cribbing half from Hitler and half from Cameron.
Yeah.
Not so you end up with that speech. But I was like, no one's going to believe that I didn't make this up.
Yeah.
That I did make it up.
Okay, maybe you were ingesting some interesting substances between midnight and 3 and channeling the future.
It's Philip K. Dick.
Again, pink laser could have been zapping these things right into your brain. Your interest in alt history or in the counterfactual, what does it mean to you? Is there a sense of trying to rewrite the past, or is it just hey, it would be interesting if this happened instead of that? How do you approach, I guess, that?
I think it's an interesting way of looking at historical processes. Because, I mean, when I realize what I do is kind of a difficult thing, because no one else is really doing what I'm doing, which is kind of...
How do you describe what you're doing? I think that's the first question.
I think it's kind of like looking at actual historical political processes, looking at really big things, like the Holocaust, like the War on Terror, but doing it through this very particular pulp lens and using alternate history. And I think that the danger with alternate history, the people who generally like alternate history kind of like working out the details. It's kind of like people who like hard science fiction, they like working out the spaceship trajectories. And I've been on that panel where, you try and say something and then they kind of ignore you and go anywhere about the spaceship trajectory.
You see, the whole thing with the neutrino drive is it's going to do...
Right. Yeah. They're like, how do you calculate that? I'm like, I don't know. I'm on the wrong panel, clearly. But so for me, it's never about just working out the details. It's not about just let's pretend that this didn't happen. Because I always come from the position, actually, this stuff did happen. Alternate history will only ever be a fictional exercise. So that's why I think the books always employ the method that there's someone in the real world kind of imagining this stuff or, projecting it, because I'm kind of saying the Holocaust did happen, but I'm using this particular set of tools in order to talk about it in a new way. Now some people would argue that that's not the right way to do it, or that morally it's not the right way. But this is I'm kind of like, these are the tools I have. And it's an interesting thing. But I never sit down and kind of work out all the details as if any of that actually makes sense. Yeah. Because they like to pretend, they're like, if I'm going to make this change, then this, and this is going to happen. It's not. You have no idea. You're just making this stuff up.
Yeah.
And I'm not into sitting down and writing a manual, which is what these books kind of tend to be. So it's only a way to talk about these very big sort of political processes. I mean, I've got this book that I finished. Again, doesn't have a publisher at the moment because, again...
Or an author who's happy with it. I'm just kidding.
I'm kind of happy with it. But again, it's kind of talking about alternate Jewish histories, and I wanted to do the whole thing about Uganda. That, the
Funnily enough, I had your third lead was going to be Hitler, Osama bin Laden, and Idi Amin. I actually wrote that down.
He was trained by the Israeli army, Idi Amin.
Yeah.
No, so there was this thing that the British kind of turned around to Herzl back in 1903, and they said, look, if you guys are looking for land, we've got a bit of land in Africa that no one's using other than, obviously, the indigenous people, but no one cares about them. So why don't you guys take it? And they ended up sending an expedition to, it's not really in Uganda, it's on the border, it's this place in Kenya somewhere. And they sent this expedition over there, which was like a Jewish engineer and a Swiss scientist or something, and one of those old school Africa hands, one of those British old school explorers. And they went over there for 2 months. They got lost. The local tribesmen kind of chased them. And they came back and they said, no, this isn't going to work. And no one, other than a few Israelis, no one really remembers it. It's a curious footnote to history. Yeah. But for Israeli writers, I think it's been quite interesting. And actually, who is it? Someone recently wrote a novel about it. But again, a novel that sort of starts there and then moves on to the alternate version of Palestine. So it doesn't really focus on that Uganda thing very much. But I've been obsessed with it for a long time, so I wanted to write about it. But at the same time, I didn't want to write a straight alternate history. So I wanted to bring in all those different alternate histories that I'm obsessed with. So Alt Neuland, which is the Herzl version, which always struck me as really sinister. Sort of utopian. I find utopias really sinister.
Yeah, as one should.
So I kind of want to bring that in, and then I want to bring one of my own, which is this Middle East where Jerusalem has been destroyed, and so everyone makes peace because we got rid of Jerusalem and all the holy places. And I wanted to bring it in a very old school kind of pulp science fiction where, like Roger Zelazny, where we have the multiple realities all fighting each other and stuff. So it's a very strange book, and it's kind of very hard to say to anyone, publish this book, because the people who want to read a serious novel about the Israeli-Palestinian situation or whatever don't want to read a pulpy alternate history with magic or whatever it is, transdimensional travel. And the people who like the pulpy transdimensional travel don't really want to read a political novel about the situation in Israel. Yeah. So it's tricky. But the weird thing is, so far, it's kind of worked for me. But I still don't understand why. I mean, every time a book gets published, I kind of wonder why anyone would publish it. Yeah, no. A Man Like Streaming, what were you thinking? It's been a strange journey. I'm not making life easy for myself,
That's what I wondered. Do you have, and I don't mean it in a derogatory way, literary fictional pretensions at all? Or did you ever have the thought of, hey, I'm going to try and write something straight for like a broad literary audience? I asked because John Crowley and I did one a few months ago. It just came out a week or so back. He's got a new fantasy novel out now, and he said, my last 3 or 4, I tried writing for a bigger literary audience, and my audience didn't follow me there, and I moved back towards fantasy. Is that something that you either aspire to or think about at all, or you're kind of happy with the multi-genre weirdness in which you're
yes, I'm very happy with my multi-genre weirdness.
Feel free to use that as a blurb.
Yeah, that would be my new band name. Yeah. No, I don't think there is a wide audience for literary fiction. I mean, most literary fiction actually doesn't get read.
That's true. I think you were thinking more just a jump over, but yeah.
But also, I try not to pay that much attention to it. I don't really necessarily think of myself as a science fiction or fantasy writer. I kind of like hanging out with science fiction and fantasy people, but I'm not sure my books are really in the same boat necessarily. Right. The funny thing with A Man Like Streaming was it was marketed as literary fiction here, rather than, and in the US actually, rather than science fiction. I think that's why no one read it, because they were like, it's on a different shelf in the bookshelf, you know. And it's difficult when you do that, because I had books, even when I go into a bookshop, I don't know what my books are, and I have to go and look in science fiction, I have to look in literary fiction, which is general fiction, and then I have to look at crime as well, in case it's over there. So it's kind of difficult. But that actually won a literary prize in the UK as well. It won the Jerwood Fiction Uncovered Prize, which was really nice, and actually paid money, which, you don't normally get in genre fiction. Yeah. It was very novel, yes. I ended up buying a really nice computer out of that, which I was happy about. But I never think about, who's going to read that, because I always assume someone like me doesn't have a built-in readership anyway. It's about making it. I just saw the novella, which again I ended up doing with Pierre. I'm going to do it with Pierce Publishing, who mostly do science fiction and fantasy, but just because they've been big supporters of my work. But I wrote a novella that has nothing to do with science fiction and fantasy. It's about a nun who plays poker, but I really wanted to write it. And when I wrote it, I thought no one, who publishes books about nuns who play poker? I have no idea. So PS were kind enough to kind of agree to publish it.
I'm sure there would be a fetish publisher for that too. But anyway, that's neither here nor there.
Well, it's a feel good. Sort of, But so I never really think in those terms. It's more about finding, if you can find a person who believes in what you do, and they're willing to publish your book, that's kind of all you can hope for. And and also I'm not one of those, I know with genre there's a lot about fandom and having fans, and people talking about their fans and building their fan base. And I've never wanted fans. What I want is readers. Yeah. But readers don't necessarily, follow you to everything. Well, follow you to everything you do or whatever. But I've never wanted fans. I've never wanted,
Yeah, do you find a social media feeder into people reading your work? Like people who discover you through Twitter, etc., having oh shit, I had no idea he had, these books, and they become fan/reader? I
have no idea. I mean, that's something you should talk to Sarah Pinborough about, because she's big on her social media thing. I don't think I have the appeal of a Sarah Pinborough on social media. No, I mean, what happened with Twitter was basically my agent said, there's this thing called Twitter, and, you should be on it. I'm like, why? It sounds stupid. It's like, well, to be part of the conversation. It's like, it sounds stupid, but I'll join it. Oh, I really like Twitter, because I get to talk, like, rubbish in 140 characters.
And it doesn't mean anything, and it goes away unless somebody hunts down your old rubbish. Yeah.
So I absolutely loved it, because it's really, basically, if I wouldn't be tweeting, I would be playing Spider Solitaire on my computer. That's essentially what it is. It's a replacement activity for when you're trying to think of what the next line you're going to write. That's all it is. So I kind of got into Twitter.
Yeah.
Whereas I hate Facebook. I think that's awful. Facebook is kind of like for old people to complain about things.
Yeah.
But I love Twitter because I just get to talk rubbish on there. So I don't know. Sometimes people kind of, it's nice because it's very immediate, and sometimes people tell you how much they like something you did, or occasionally tell you how much they hate something.
I was waiting for that part of it. Yeah.
Yes. I mean,
and you can expect to be called worse than Hitler, which is always important. When you're on the internet,
I never get it. I think being a guy, you probably spare the worst sort of abuse.
That's true. Yeah, you're not threatened with a...
And also not being important enough, because, like in American science fiction now, that whole big fight between the right wing and the left wing of science fiction and so on. I don't really belong in either. Like, I don't belong there, so no one pays me any attention.
But being Israeli carries its own set of responsibilities, but it carries a set of connotations, I guess.
Yeah, but again, I don't really get. I mean,
no one comes after you for it.
No, again, very disappointing to an extent.
Well, maybe by the end of this, people will think horrible things of you and start sending angry letters. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I had this one Israeli film producer wanted me to do some work for him, and then he was like so right wing. He was like the right wing of Hitler. And he, and he was like, "Yeah, I don't want to work with you because you're like, your politics is terrible." I'm like, "Well, I don't want to work with you. I was going to do it for the money, but
Yeah.
But no, I don't really get that much.
Yeah. You mentioned morality, or, morally, it's wrong to write, X, Y, or Z. Not that you felt that way, but that was a critic's take on something. Do you see morality as part of writing, as part of what you decide to write? Is there a moral
No,
thing?
Absolutely. I think they are all moral projects, know. I mean, I never set to write something purely for entertainment.
Yeah.
And I enjoy writing entertainment, but I always feel like if it didn't have that extra value added thing to it, if it didn't have an argument behind it, then it's not worth doing. So even my pulpier stuff would be stuff that kind of engages with some sort of question that I consider important. So yeah, definitely. I mean, my subjects have been, the Holocaust, terrorism,
Israeli
politics. Yeah. Like I said, very typical. The kibbutz one day, But so I'm never making my life. I'm never sitting down and just saying, I'm gonna write, a fun novel about. A farm boy who discovers he's really the heir to the throne. And if I was doing it, I'd be like saying, well, is monarchy really a good system to have? And kind of go into that. I don't know.
And the tough Jew trope in America, as Jews were generally regarded in the intellectual weakling, etc., the Woody Allen sort of Jew, coming from an Israeli mindset or an Israeli upbringing, just having that very different idea of what the context of being Jewish is, or who you are culturally, that play into how you portray?
Well, that is an interesting question, isn't it? Because I was never considered, for example, a Jewish writer. Mm-hmm. It's only after A Man Lies Dreaming at Central Station that kind of Jewish reviewers kind of started picking up on me. And again, there's a big difference between being Jewish and being Israeli. Yeah. Right.
Because you can be anti-Israel, but not anti-Semitic. I'm just kidding. We won't even go into that.
Yeah.
Don't worry.
But there is a big difference in that perception, and you can see it in, say, Michael Chabon's Yiddish Policemen's Union, when he has these kind of very American Jews living in Alaska, and he has the kind of the Sabra Israelis at the end, kind of, fermenting revolution or whatever it is they do at the end of the book. So there's a big difference, and part of the kind of Sabra identity is this very tough guy, macho sort of thing. The only problem is science fiction fantasies writers don't tend to be very much
those guys, yeah.
And all my Israeli mates who are science fiction fantasy writers didn't have illustrious army careers or anything like that. We are kind of the weedy, nerdy kids. But I do know that I don't quite fit in either camp. I'm not really I'm not an American Jew or British Jew, which is a kind of an odd construction in itself. but I'm not really all that much of an Israeli either.
What do you consider home? I know you've done a lot of traveling over the course of your life, but...
Yeah, it's tricky, isn't it? I've my home was wherever my backpack was. The problem with that is when you move, and I'm a terrible traveler. I mean, what I like is... I hate traveling. What I like is going somewhere, and then I'm so exhausted by the traveling that I stay there for a couple of years, and then I can move on. But what happens then is you have to keep buying new cutlery. And that's what really broke us down in the end, was all the cutlery, So now we have this cutlery, this really good cutlery, and we're not getting rid of this cutlery. Wherever we go, the cutlery is going to come with. This is it. We're going to die with this cutlery. So I don't know. Like, I like England, but I hate the weather and the food and everything about it.
It's been wet outside all day. There's no vestige of sunlight, and
I'm from the Mediterranean. I need sun. I need heat. I need food that isn't disgusting. I don't know.
You've been to America?
No.
Okay. Is it something... A, something you want to do? B, does America have a certain context for you?
It's got a huge appeal. I mean, a part of me thinks I would have been, in another life, I would have been a proper sort of red-blooded sort of American, with a pickup truck and a shotgun and a dog in the back and kind of hitting the road. It's very appealing. But I think, again, because I'm so bad at traveling, I think if I ever do go to America, it would be to live in America, because I'd want to really experience that. Mm-hmm. But I seem to have kind of mostly ended up in Africa and Asia and Europe. So, there's still time. There's still time, he said, counting the years slipping by. But
they'll let you import the cutlery. You can bring that through customs.
As long as I can bring my knife and fork with me, be all right. Plus, I think I would never be able to resist the food. So I would just balloon and become huge.
Yeah, no, it's land of the obese. It can be pretty frightening.
I mean, England keeps you, thin because you don't want to eat anything here.
I didn't want to say anything to our hosts, but yeah, I'm with you. Now, did you go to college? Did you study? I couldn't recall from my research with you if you started traveling sort of My question is, what did you study, I guess?
Oh, right. No, I went traveling first. I ended up at university later.
Okay.
But I actually ended up going to an American university in London. Mm-hmm. Simply because they offered me a scholarship that was quite handy. So I started off doing computers because I thought, I'm paying a lot of money to study and I should do something useful on computers. And then I ended up switching into literature in the end. But it was still one of those degrees where you just end up taking a whole bunch of different classes, which is probably useless for job purposes, but great for a writer. Yeah. So I could do a bit of linguistics and then a bit of programming and then a bit of Shakespeare and then a bit of Pacific history or whatever. So it was great.
Was there an area you really dug that you weren't expecting to groove on, or something that you find feeding into what you do now? Well, it all does. I mean, I'm still very much a sort of a computer guy, a techie, and I think that comes in. And what happened with Central Station, weirdly enough, was that all these guys in Silicon Valley picked up on it, which I never expected. And also, the book wasn't really about the science fiction. It was just about the relationships, but it's got all this science fiction-y stuff. And all these guys in Silicon Valley were like, this is great because it's this future where we don't kill ourselves and we do go to Mars. And I'm like, no, it wasn't meant to be a blueprint. But, that I have that whole techie side of me, and I've got, what I did find out that I enjoyed history a lot. But the problem I have is I'll never be a historian because I only ever look at it as a writer. So I kind of think, well, this is interesting, but wouldn't it be more interesting if we changed that? Or what was the real supernatural reason for this to happen? So I would make a terrible historian. But that's when I really discovered that interest in history that kind of informs all the books. So no, it was really good. I mean, I think being a student in general is just fantastic when it opens up so many things you don't know. And I went back to university. They asked me to come and teach a course in the summer. So I thought, I've never done that before. I'll try it. And that was super interesting because, again, it forces you to kind of engage with a lot of things that you wouldn't necessarily engage with. So I kind of got interested in Arthurian legends. So I'm gonna do a book about King Arthur at some point. Because I got really interested, and then I got really interested in fairyland.
which I never really gave much thought to. And then I was like, oh, I'm going to do a book about fairyland. So, I have a magpie attention span. So I'm like, oh, this is shiny. I'll do that. This is shiny. But I think it's really exciting. Whereas if you're just a full-time writer, you just sit at home and you don't engage with anything or anyone.
But you have the internet.
But you have the internet. You get to troll people.
The only 2 novels of yours I've read have both been under 300 pages. Do you see one of those 700-800 page gigantors in your future? Or is that part of your magpie thing that, hey, I can get in and get out?
Yeah, I can't do it. I don't know how people do it.
Yeah, that's what I wonder, because you seem to have that vibe, and it's part of the Pulp thing to make it a reading experience that you can do in not a single sitting, but,
Books used to be short. They used to be 60,000 words, 70,000 words.
Dude, I was so thankful when John connected us. I started looking up some of your books. I'm like, oh, that's under 300. Okay, I'll read those 2 books in the next week or so, and.
No, I mean, it's insane. I don't understand. And actually, I've found all these big books that have won, like, the Booker Prize recently, or won the Clark, or what, I can't remember. But, I do try and read a lot of these books, and I get to about 500 pages, which is longer than any of my novels.
Yeah.
And I think, okay, I've read 500 pages. I think I'm good.
Yeah.
I'm good. I don't need
don't
to
need
keep
to know the
going.
ending.
Why is it so long? And it's this cultural disconnect. I can't really do them. Even aiming for the 90,000, which is kind of the average commercial length for a novel now, I find incredibly difficult. So I'm much more comfortable at short length. And I really, still to this day, see myself more as a short story writer than a novelist.
Yeah, I was going to ask. You'd mentioned that in the past, and that's something you still feel that you're really much more suited for the short fiction?
Yeah, I'm much happier with that. Or novellas, which are, the worst paying format in the world, but they're my favorite thing to write.
It worked for Stefan Zweig. Admittedly, it was 100 years ago, but
Yes, because he ended up like
yes,
so his life was great. I mean,
if you ever write something as good as Chess Story, then you've got. I'm sorry, go on.
Well, I think some of my best stuff was probably in short length, but even with novels, I kind of try and go. But you can't do it commercially. You can't do it, and I'm lucky. I work with Tachyon, for example, on Central Station or the next book. They allow you to write short books, which is great. So I can cut down, I can kind of streamline, I can make it go better.
And Central Station's also I would say a collection of short stories, but they're standalone chapters that all tie together. Do you see that as a sort of a compromise? I don't mean in a negative way, but that way I can write shorter pieces, but I can string them into a larger.
No, absolutely. I mean, there was, I started that project, and the whole idea was I was always interested in mosaic novels, the sort of stuff that got published as short stories first and then put together. But what people keep going, it's a short story collection, it's not a novel, when clearly everyone who's done this in the past, you do it with a unified vision in place. You don't just write a short story and then go, oh, well, maybe I'll do another one. And it would just happen to fit in. And then maybe I'll do another one. Like, you come with a unified vision for the whole thing. Yeah. But this way allowed me to do it over 5-6 years in my spare time, because I thought no one's going to buy any of this stuff. No one's going to read this. Publish it as individual short stories, And when we did the book, firstly, I didn't know how to edit it properly into what I envisioned. So I was really stuck. I needed someone to actually say, this is what you need to do. And I was going to self-publish, because I was like, no one's going to publish this weird short book that nothing happens in and there's no plot. And I get all these 1-star reviews that say there's no plot in this book. I'm like, I know.
I'm sorry.
Like, there's no plot in this book. Yeah. It's not. Like, don't read this book.
Well, that was my funny thing. I didn't know it was I was reading it on a Kindle, or a Kindle app, and there are a couple of moments in a few different chapters where like a certain thing gets repeated in a way that I was like, why would they tell us this thing again? And at the very end, I get to the indicia with every single chapter appeared in the previous one. I'm like, oh, okay, that makes sense. That's why it's done the way it is.
We cut a lot of the repetition that was there for the original, for the short story publication. But sometimes repetition is also, it's like a musical term.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, there were things that I knew were there to keep the thread running throughout.
And again, people kind of got really objected to the ending. I mean, not spoiling anything, but kind of objecting that it doesn't have the transcendental ending that science fiction has. When the entire point of the ending is to kind of say, forget that nonsense. You know, this isn't like the book actually says this is not childhood's end. It actually tells you,
explicitly,
this is not childhood's end. Which I always like, because science fiction always has to end in transcendence. You know, and I was kind of like, well, actually, it doesn't. It's kind of more about people. We don't and all turn into butterflies and fly away at the end.
Yeah.
But what was weird, so it was really a vanity project for me, and that's why I was doing these little short stories and publishing them here and there, and then with Tachyon, I kind of sent them the manuscript knowing that it needed the work, and they basically came back with an editorial letter, and they said, this is what you need to do. So you need to cut this, change the order here, do this. And I think they were kind of worried about it because they're like, oh, you know.
He'll never take us up with all these notes.
We just really kind of came down hard on him. And I just went, thank you. Yeah. Thank you so much. Finally, someone tells me what I need to do. So that was an absolute pleasure to do. Mm-hmm. But it was a vanity project. So I kind of thought, well, you know, it was something to do between books. So I had A Man Lies Dreaming come out. And I was hoping to have another big novel at some point down the road. So I thought, so we'll do this little thing and no one's going to read it. And
it'll be cute.
It would be cute. It would be a nice thing to have. And instead, people liked it. I don't understand it to this day. People kind of liked it. I was like, why? Like, I probably wouldn't buy this book. You know, it has no plot. Yeah. Like, there's no end. Like, there's no plot, no ending. It's all about these people. You know.
But it creates it's a great world. You know, it's a great vibe to it all.
I mean, you get reviews that kind of say there's no characters in this book, and then you get reviews that say there's nothing but characters in this book. Yeah. You know, so you can't win. It's kind of like, but it did so much better than I ever expected, and you know, it's coming out in like 10 different languages now. It's coming out in China and Russia.
Have you ever helped any of your work get translated into Hebrew?
No, Central Station finally came out in Israel. Mm. I've had a curse with Israel, which don't get me started on that. We're not going to go
exactly what I get you started on.
We're not going to go into the whole Israeli thing, but let's just say I felt like I was actually getting paid to not publish in Israel. It was like a reverse BDS thing, you know. They're like, we'll pay you, but just don't publish your books, you know. And so finally I had a book come out. It was Central Station, which I haven't seen a copy. It just came out. The translator kind of emailed me with questions, but that was it. You know, didn't really. And also, I said to them all the little bits that kind of explain things that an Israeli would already know. Just get rid of them.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Because that is for a foreign audience. Yeah. So I don't know.
Yeah.
So she asked me a lot of really interesting questions.
Is it possible the author didn't know you were Israeli?
No.
Okay, I wasn't sure if that was also.
No, and they emailed me in Hebrew, which always. Okay. I was like, let me just like do the whole thing and like. You know. But I hope it's okay.
Do you think in English or Hebrew? Don't think too hard because you're not going to be able to. Your brain will start smoking.
Well, I make the switch. Yeah. You know, you make the switch, and it's. I only heard this term recently, code switching. You know, when you kind of switch from who you are depending on where you are. So. I mean, I mostly use English, but as soon as I switch to Hebrew...
You just fall into that mode.
Yeah, I fall into that, and it's...
You shout more?
Well, I'm Israeli enough to shout a lot anyway and to be quite rude.
Yeah, I'll have to do some processing on the audio to make sure we're level at the end.
My wife complains at me for shouting. I'm like, what do you want? I'm talking in my lowest voice.
You married an Israeli. Yeah. What did you expect?
I'm like, I wave my hands and shout a lot and demand things.
You know? If you were American, we would say you were selling, American Israeli, selling electronics. That would be your...
Yes. There's a lot of us in Hollywood now. Huh?
Yeah. We try not to play up that because, you know, people tend to misunderstand it into being
That's true. Yeah, well, we'll go back to selling electronics.
Do you have, we'll say posthumous, right? Do you have writing that you know you're never going to publish?
Right.
You just keep on this. I know some cartoonists who have that, and I wonder if you have anything that I'm going to write this on the side, but this is not ever intended to go anywhere.
No, but okay. I'd like to. That's something I thought about a lot. I mean, I admire writers like James Ellroy because Ellroy literally doesn't leave anything. Yeah. You know, he puts everything on the page. He really digs in and he doesn't care. He's going to put it all. And I'm still at the point where I can't do that. You know, I have to use some restraint. And I'd love to be able to do that. I'd love to take everything out and put it on the page. But Yeah, that's kind of a tricky one to do. That sort of nothing to lose attitude.
Family hang-ups at all? Not spouse, but parents?
No,
weird,
I mean, it's just,
embarrassing
I think it's for everyone. Everyone has these sort of, but I love that everyone can dig into that darkness and put it out there. I thought I came pretty close with A Man Lies Dreaming.
Yeah, I was going to say, you've got Hitler getting sodomized and various other,
super dark book, but still, you can probably go even deeper. The question is, do you want to? I mean, and also, does anyone want to read that?
Yeah.
So I don't really. I mean, I kind of write stuff hoping that someone, it will get published if not read. Mm-hmm. And I've kind of given up on. I know people say some people care about reviews a lot or readers, and I'm kind of at the point. I think you get to the point where you just think, well, some people are going to get it, some people are not going to get it, some people are going to like it, some people are not going to like it. And it becomes kind of meaningless unless it's a really insightful review or if it's a super negative review, which are fun. But otherwise, you don't really care. So I just kind of write it for myself, and as long as I'm happy with it.
Yeah. Have you ever responded to a negative review? Under your own name?
Not under my own name. No, I don't think so. You do. Sometimes they annoy you. I mean,
but I mean, actually, write back or write okay.
Like, you idiot.
Yeah, it's like, how dare you misread me? Yeah.
You don't understand.
My genius.
Let me trap you in a basement and make you read all my books until you understand them. Yeah, that's probably the sort of darkness you don't want to carry into your books. No, I don't really mind.
Cool. Let me ask, last sort of question. Comics.
Yeah.
You've written a couple.
Yeah.
What was your comic, influence, or what comics did you read, or what are the things that kind of inform that that form?
That's kind of the weird thing. I don't really have it. Yeah. Comics was never something I was into, and partly it's because in Israel we didn't really have comics.
Right.
And so coming to it as an adult, you kind of read a lot of it and you think, it's not really that great, is it? And it's kind of, not to be like rude to any comics people, which I'm usually rude to them when I see them.
Oh, they're right down the street. There's a comic store right over here. They're going to come up and pitchforks, torches.
I hang out at comics conventions and stuff, so I tend to be rude to people after a few drinks. But they're incredibly sweet people, comics writers, I have to say. I think it was, kind of, what it was the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. Mm-hmm. When there's this weird, disgusting scene where the Invisible Man rapes. No, Mr. Hyde rapes the Invisible Man. I thought, hold on a second, you can't do that. You can't do that in comics. And I thought, as soon as I saw that, I thought, well, okay, if you can do that, then I might be interested.
Yeah.
But actually what I found is, firstly, I love working with artists. So for me, because I have no talent whatsoever.
No visual imagination. I cannot do that.
Well, that's the thing. I found that I have great visual imagination. I have really good instincts as an art director, as saying what should be there, but I have absolutely zero talent in doing it. Yeah. And so working with an artist, firstly, you make them do all the hard work, which is great. It's like saying, this is my idea for a novel, you go and write it, So they have to do all the heavy lifting. And it's also amazing because I have this thing in my head, and if I manage to somehow communicate it to the artist and they do it, and it's amazing. So, I work a lot with artists. The next, the proper comics I've got coming out is something called Adler, which is sort of the League of Extraordinary Gentlewomen, I suppose. And it's with this amazing artist called Paul McCaffrey, who's kind of got stolen from me to do Anno Dracula, the Anno Dracula comics. So it's very, very slow, but it's coming along. So hopefully we'll have this whole full 5-issue miniseries come out at some point in the future, in a very distant future. Mm-hmm. But Titan Comics are doing it. And, and I'd love to do more. I mean, there's one project that I have kind of in development with this artist, but artists are, they're slow and they have to do most of the work. I just get to write this stuff. Yeah. But it's really exciting. And I'm really excited when Adler comes out, because I was like, from the start, I was like, well, think about the cosplay. All my instructors were like, think about the cosplay. Just when you're designing the outfit.
Female Sherlock Holmes and
Well, yeah, because I hated what the TV series did to Irene Adler. I just thought it was so disrespectful to the greatest character in Sherlock Holmes.
My wife likes the series. I haven't seen it.
Well, no, I just thought it was horrible. They kind of took this amazing character and just turned her in. The first time you see her, she's naked or something, and she's like. And I actually got angry enough by watching this to say, I'm going to write my own film version, but focusing on Irene Adler. And once I wrote that, I was like, no one's going to pay me $250 million to make a minor budget, movie. And then we ended up doing the comics. So
you'll have a whole Lavie Tidhar multimedia empire. You'll see. It's all,
No, there is. I mean, there's a TV series in development, which,
A Man Lies Dreaming? I'm kidding.
HBO is a Man Lies Dreaming. I always thought George Clooney would be quite good as Hitler. Or Kenneth Branagh as Hitler or someone, But no, I don't. Hollywood's not knocking on my door to ask for my Adolf Hitler adaptation, unfortunately.
Give it time. There's always a possibility.
But, yeah. And it's just exciting to do different things. I'd still like to do an English poetry collection at some point, because my first book was a Hebrew poetry collection. I'd love to do an English poetry collection at some point. And it's exciting doing comics. I did a little bit of film work, not really something I'm that enthusiastic about, but it was, again, interesting.
What was it, that particular experience, or just the overall collaborative thing? Yeah, and the whole workflow?
All of it, I think. It's not really that interesting for me. And I like to have full control. But, and I'm getting into children's books now, and I'm really interested in picture books in particular. That's something that's really exciting for me. So, as long as you get to keep it fresh and just experiment and do new things, even if they don't necessarily work out, you're learning, and it's interesting and it's new. And I'd much rather do that than write the same book over and over and over again.
Sounds good. Lavie, thanks so much for coming on the Virtual Memories Show.
Thank you for having me. It's been fun.
And that was Lavie Tidhar. His website is lavietidhar.wordpress.com, and he's on Twitter as Lavie Tidhar. And now I will spell that for you. LAVIETIDHAR. And there'll be links to all those in the show notes. Now, I really enjoyed the two novels of his that I read, A Man Lies Dreaming and Central Station. And you'll find out info about both of those books, along with his other books, anthologies, comics, etc., at his site, along with a link to the Jewish Mexican Literary Review, of which he is the co-founder and co-editor. Now, once we wrapped up the main session, I asked Lavie, so, who are you reading? And if you want to hear his answer to that, you'll need to become a supporter of the Virtual Memories Show so you can get access to our quarterly bonus podcast, Fear of a Square Planet. The newest episode of that one went up a little while ago, and it features new material from Shannon Wheeler, Barry Blitt, Martin Rosen, Nicholas Delbanco, Eshkol Nevo, Paul Gravett, Eddie Portnoy, Vanda Kreft, and Cullen Murphy. You can support the Virtual Memories Show via patreon.com/VMSpod or paypal.me/VMSpod. And I've got all sorts of goals and goodies in place for patrons, including that podcast, patron-only blog, handwritten show notes for every episode, my new secret project, and more. So go to patreon.com/VMSpod and support the art of fine conversation. We recorded this episode at the home of John and Judith Clute in London. I stayed with them for a few days after a business trip to Frankfurt last October, so overall the trip just cost me airfare from Frankfurt to London, plus food, tube, etc., since my company picked up the rest of the round trip, and John and Judith were gracious hosts and didn't charge me rent. If you want to help defray some of the costs of the Virtual Memories Show, like web hosting, travel, equipment, coffee, or even if you just want to toss me some money because you think the show is worth it, then visit patreon.com/VMSpod or paypal.me/VMSpod and make a one-time or recurring donation. The special thanks go out to John Wendler, Fred Kish, Jonathan Kranz, Stephen Nadler, Wallace Wilding Minozzi, Noah Van Sciver, Andrew Mason, Greg Tanner, Garrett Zecker, Craig P. Steffen, Jack Les Camella, Joe Caruso, Paul Karasik, and Michael Janizik for going over and above in their support of the Virtual Memories show. We have the full list of show supporters at chimeraobscura.com/VM. Our music for this episode is Nothing's Gonna Bring Me Down by David Bayerwald, used with permission from the artist. And that's it for this week's episode of the Virtual Memories Show. Thanks so much for listening. As I mentioned at the top, I don't have any shows in the can and no one lined up, so I have no idea if there'll even be an episode next week. I've got a bunch of great ones lined up for later in the year and even later this month, but the combo of work and life stuff has left me with a little bit of a podcast gap. But I hope to be here next week. Until then, you can subscribe to the Virtual Memories Show and download past episodes at the iTunes Store. You can also find all our episodes, get on our email list at either of our websites, vmspod.com or chimeraobscura.com/VM. You can also follow the Virtual Memories Show on Twitter and Instagram at VMSPod, at Facebook.com/Virtual Memories Show, at virtualmemoriespodcast.tumblr.com, and on YouTube and TuneIn.com by searching for Virtual Memories Show. And if you like this podcast, please go to iTunes, look up the Virtual Memories Show, and leave a rating and or review for us. That'll help us build a bigger audience. You've been listening to the Virtual Memories Show. I'm your host, Gil Roth, and you are awesome. Keep it that way.